Victor never took chances when it came to children's safety. He knew every corner of the park, every entrance and exit. That's why he'd noticed the stranger standing in the same spot for 20 minutes, watching the children. And now as the man approached little Emily, the old warrior inside Victor was awakening. "Sir," he said, his voice carrying steel-cold authority, "can I help you with something?" Before we dive into this powerful story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if this story moves you, make sure you subscribe, because tomorrow I have something very special planned for you. Riverside Park at 9:30 a.m. was Victor Stone's favorite time of day. The morning joggers had finished their routes, the dog walkers had collected their newspapers and headed home, and the families with young children were just beginning to arrive for what would become a bustling afternoon of playground activity. At 55, Victor had been the head groundskeeper at Riverside Park for 7 years, ever since he'd moved to the quiet suburban community of Millbrook. To the families who visited regularly, he was simply Mr. Victor, the patient man in the khaki work shirt and baseball cap who always had time to help a child retrieve a stuck ball or point parents toward the nearest restroom. Victor's routine was methodical and precise. Every morning he walked the entire perimeter of the 12-acre park, checking for safety hazards, vandalism, or anything that seemed out of place. His eyes moved constantly, scanning not just for maintenance issues, but for patterns, behaviors, and potential problems that most people would never notice. The park itself reflected his careful attention to detail. Flower beds arranged with mathematical precision, walking paths swept clean of debris, playground equipment inspected and maintained to standards that exceeded city requirements. Parents often commented on how safe and well-maintained Riverside Park felt compared to other municipal facilities. What they didn't realize was that Victor's approach to park maintenance had been shaped by 2 decades of military training and observation, threat assessment, and perimeter security. His seemingly casual morning walks were actually systematic reconnaissance. His friendly conversations with visitors were intelligence gathering, and his positioning throughout the day ensured maximum visual coverage of all park activities. This morning started like any other. Victor was deadheading roses near the main playground when he noticed the man in the gray jacket. Nothing immediately alarming, just another adult in the park. But something about his positioning triggered Victor's professional instincts. The man had been standing near the same bench for exactly 23 minutes. Victor knew because he'd checked his watch when the stranger first caught his attention, and he'd been tracking him ever since through peripheral vision while continuing his gardening work. Normal park visitors moved with purpose. Parents followed their children, joggers maintained routes, dog owners responded to their pets' needs. This man was different. He stood motionless, his attention focused entirely on the playground area where a dozen children played under their parents' supervision. Victor continued his work with flowers, but his movements had shifted into what his old unit would have recognized as tactical positioning. Without appearing to do anything unusual, he'd maneuvered himself to maintain visual contact with both the stranger and the children while keeping multiple exit routes available. The man was approximately 6 feet 2 inches, medium build, wearing dark jeans and a gray windbreaker despite the warm morning temperature. His hair was unkempt, and he carried no visible belongings, no phone, no coffee, no dog leash. None of the normal accessories that explained why someone would linger in a public park. Most concerning was his focus. While parents chatted with each other and checked their phones, while other visitors walked past pursuing their own activities, this man's attention never wavered from the children. His eyes followed specific individuals, lingering longest on a blonde girl who appeared to be about 7 years old. Victor recognized the behavior pattern from training he'd received decades earlier. This wasn't casual observation. This was target selection. The girl, Emily, according to the woman pushing her on the swing, was playing with characteristic childhood abandon. Her mother was engaged in conversation with another parent, glancing periodically at her daughter, but not maintaining constant visual contact. Victor made his decision. Moving with deliberate calm, he began walking toward the playground area, pruning shears in hand, ostensibly continuing his morning maintenance routine. Beautiful morning for the park. Victor said conversationally as he approached the man's position. His tone was friendly, the kind of casual comment that park employees made to visitors dozens of times each day. The stranger startled slightly, as if he'd been so focused on watching the children that he hadn't noticed Victor's approach. "Oh yes, nice park." Victor nodded, beginning to trim dead branches from a nearby shrub. The work positioned him where he could observe both the man and the playground while appearing to focus entirely on his gardening duties. "You have children here today?" Victor asked, making conversation while assessing the stranger's response patterns. "No, just enjoying the fresh air." The man's answer came too quickly, and his eyes immediately returned to the playground. Victor's internal alarm system escalated. 20 years of military experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and every instinct was telling him this situation was developing in the wrong direction. "Park gets pretty busy around this time," Victor continued, his voice remaining conversational. "Lots of families with young kids. We take safety very seriously here." The emphasis on safety was subtle but deliberate. Victor was establishing territorial awareness, letting the stranger know that this space was monitored and protected. The man glanced at Victor for the first time, his expression shifting from distracted to mildly annoyed. "Is there a problem?" "Not at all," Victor replied calmly. "Just making sure everyone's enjoying their visit safely." But even as he spoke, Victor noticed the man's attention returning to Emily, who had left the swing set and was now playing on the climbing structure closer to where they stood. Her mother was still engaged in conversation, her back turned to the playground. The stranger began moving toward the playground equipment, his path calculated to intercept Emily as she played. Victor immediately shifted his own position, maintaining the appearance of casual groundskeeping while staying within intervention distance. "Emily, be careful on the monkey bars," the girl's mother called out without turning around, then resumed her conversation. The man was now less than 15 feet from Emily, who was focused entirely on her climb up the rope ladder. Victor could see the moment of decision forming in the stranger's posture, the subtle shift from observation to action. "Sir," Victor said, his voice carrying a new quality that made the man stop mid-step. "Can I help you with something?" The friendliness was gone now, replaced by unmistakable authority. Victor had straightened to his full height, and somehow his entire presence had changed. The patient groundskeeper had vanished, replaced by someone who radiated controlled threat. "I'm just walking around the park," the man replied, but his voice carried less confidence than before. "I notice you've been watching the children," Victor said directly, "for quite a while now." The man's expression hardened. "It's a public park. I can stand wherever I want." "That's absolutely true," Victor agreed. "But when someone spends 30 minutes focused entirely on children who aren't theirs, that becomes my concern." Emily had reached the top of the climbing structure and was looking around with the satisfaction of a successful ascent. She was now less than 10 feet from the stranger, close enough that a quick movement could close the distance before anyone could react. "You need to leave," Victor said quietly, his words carrying finality. The man's face flushed with anger. "You can't tell me to leave a public park. You're just the gardener." Victor smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Sir, I'm asking politely once. After that, we'll handle this differently." The stranger took a step toward Emily, apparently testing Victor's resolve. It was the wrong choice. Victor moved with fluid precision that seemed to bend the laws of physics. One moment he was standing casually beside a flower bed. The next he was between the man and Emily, close enough that his voice would carry to the stranger but not alarm the children. 20 years Army, Victor said quietly, his tone conversational but his eyes deadly serious. "Specialized reconnaissance and target elimination. I can drop you where you stand, or you can walk away and pretend this conversation never happened." The transformation was complete now. Gone was any pretense of being simply a park employee. Victor's posture, his movements, his entire presence radiated the kind of controlled lethality that comes from decades of training in environments where hesitation meant death. The stranger had gone pale, finally recognizing that he'd catastrophically misjudged the situation. "I wasn't doing anything. You were selecting a target," Victor corrected matter-of-factly. "Blonde girl, approximately 7 years old, mother distracted by social conversation, positioned near park exit with minimal witness coverage. Classic predatory behavior pattern. The clinical accuracy of Victor's assessment hit the man like a physical blow. This wasn't a gardener making lucky guesses. This was someone who understood exactly what had been happening and why. Walk away, Victor continued. Right now. Use the main gate. Don't look back, don't return, and find somewhere else to indulge whatever fantasies brought you here. Emily called out cheerfully, Mr. Victor, watch me go down the slide. I'm watching, sweetheart, Victor replied, his voice immediately warming. But his eyes never left the stranger. Be careful. The man began backing away. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. This is harassment. This is protection, Victor corrected. And you're still here. The stranger turned and walked quickly toward the park's main entrance, his pace just short of a run. Victor maintained visual contact until the man had exited the park entirely and disappeared down the street. Only then did Victor allow himself to relax slightly, though his awareness remained heightened. Predators often worked in pairs, and the first rule of threat assessment was never assume a single contact meant the danger had passed. Mr. Victor, Emily called from the bottom of the slide. Did you see how fast I went? I sure did, Victor said, his voice returning to its normal friendly tone. That was very impressive. Emily's mother, Sarah, finally looked up from her conversation. Emily, don't bother Mr. Victor. He's working. She's never a bother, Victor assured her. I enjoy seeing the kids have fun. Sarah smiled gratefully. We're so lucky to have you here. This park always feels so safe when you're around. If only she knew how accurate that statement was, Victor thought. But part of good security was ensuring that protected people never had to know how much protection they actually needed. Victor resumed his gardening work, but his positioning remained tactical. He'd learned long ago that predators rarely gave up after a single failure. They often returned at different times or moved to different locations where they thought security would be less vigilant. For the next 2 hours, Victor maintained elevated awareness while appearing to focus entirely on routine maintenance. He noted every adult who entered the park, tracked their movements and behaviors, and maintained coverage of the playground areas where children were most vulnerable. Later that afternoon, after the families had gone home and the park had returned to its peaceful evening quiet, Victor sat on his usual bench with a cup of coffee, processing the day's events. His phone buzzed with a text from his old unit commander. Heard you're keeping busy in civilian life. Everything okay out there? Victor smiled slightly. Even in retirement, the Brotherhood maintained contact, checking on each other across distance and time. All quiet on the suburban front, he texted back, just keeping the flowers watered and the kids safe. The response came quickly. Once a guardian, always a guardian. Stay sharp. Victor pocketed his phone and looked across the park that had become his responsibility. 7 years ago, when he'd first arrived in Millbrook, he'd thought his protective career was over. The Army had taught him to eliminate threats, but civilian life required more subtle approaches to keeping people safe. Groundskeeping had seemed like peaceful work, a chance to build something beautiful instead of destroying things dangerous. But he'd learned that protection took many forms, and sometimes the most important battlefields were quiet parks where children played under the assumption that the world was safe. His military training had never really left him. It had simply adapted to different circumstances. Instead of watching for insurgents and IEDs, he watched for predators and hazards. Instead of protecting fellow soldiers, he protected families who would never know his name or understand what he'd given up to be there. The work was different, but the mission remained the same: stand between innocent people and those who would harm them. As the sun set over Riverside Park, Victor completed his final security walk of the day. Tomorrow would bring new families, new children, new potential threats to assess and address. He would be ready, just as he had been today, just as he would be for as long as the community needed him. His official title was head groundskeeper, but Victor Stone's real job description was simpler: guardian. Protector of a small piece of the world where children could play safely and parents could relax without fear. Some warriors retired to rocking chairs and fishing boats. Others found new battlefields where the stakes were just as high, but the victories were measured in different ways. In children who made it safely home, in families who never knew they'd been in danger, in communities that remained peaceful because someone chose to stand watch. Victor locked the maintenance shed and headed home to his small apartment, where photos of his old unit shared shelf space with pictures of park events and thank you cards from local families. Different chapters of the same life, all dedicated to the simple principle that someone had to be willing to step forward when others needed protection. Tomorrow would bring another day of tending flowers and watching over children. And Victor Stone would be there, invisible guardian of a peaceful place, ready to remind anyone who threatened that safety that some things were still sacred and some people were still willing to fight for them. Have you ever noticed someone watching over your community in ways you might not have realized? Share your stories in the comments below and let us know what city you're watching from today. If this story of quiet protection resonated with you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And don't miss the 2 compelling stories appearing on your screen right now. Click and discover more tales of everyday guardians with extraordinary dedication, because the greatest protectors are often the ones who keep us safe without us ever knowing we were in danger. See you in the next videos. Don't forget to like and subscribe.